Today's date is May 22nd, 2017. A lesson entitled Hebrew Masoretic Correction. From this website, oodegger.com, I think it's spelled OODEGR.com, and this page is entitled The Hebrew Bible Moses Couldn't Read. The idea here is that they're saying if Moses would read the Hebrew Bible today, he wouldn't be able to understand it because it would look so different to him. But we think, oh, this is the Hebrew. Bits and pieces from this page here. They say most of the Old Testament scriptures were written in paleo-hebrew or a closely related derivative. So it seems like people are not always so sure. Generally considered to be an offshoot of ancient Phoenician script. Paleo-Hebrew represents the pen of David, the script of Moses, and perhaps even the finger of God and the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. Modern Hebrew, on the other hand, is not so quite ancient. Israelites acquired this new alphabet from Assyria, Persia, somewhere around the 6th to 7th century BC. This was the same general time period as their exile to Babylon, many centuries after most of the Old Testament was actually written. Initially, the Old Testament scriptures were exclusively written in Paleo-Hebrew. Then, after borrowing the new alphabet from the Assyrians, the Hebrews began transliterating large portions of scripture into the newer version. The Samaritan Pentateuch uses the Samaritan alphabet, which is closely related to Paleo-Hebrew. It is likely that much of the text looks similar to what Moses and David saw in the original copies of the Old Testament. The Masoretic text differs from the Samaritan Pentateuch in over 6,000 places. Basically, they're saying the new Hebrew alphabet was used to transcribe the majority of the Old Testament. While many Protestant Bibles rely heavily on the Masoretic text, the Orthodox Church has continued to use the Septuagint for the past 2,000 years. This person here is saying, I used to believe the Masoretic text was a perfect copy of the original Old Testament. I used to believe that the Masoretic text was how God divinely preserved the Hebrew scriptures throughout the ages. I was wrong. The oldest copies of the Masoretic text only date back to the 10th century, nearly 1,000 years after the time of Christ. And these texts differ from the originals in many specific ways. Basically, that's like saying to you, the Bible you have now is different from the Bible that was originally put together. The Masoretic text is named after the Masoreths, who were scribes and Torah scholars who worked in the Middle East between the 7th and 11th centuries. Now, I believe, let me see if I'll cover this. Yeah, I might read that for you in a bit, so I'll skip it for now. So these scribes and Torah scholars worked in the Middle East between the 7th and the 11th centuries. They have said Torah scholars and scribes. Notice what they are not saying here is that the Hebrews, or people from the children of Israel, worked on the text during the 7th and 11th centuries, but instead they are saying scribes and Torah scholars did this work. So then, with our understanding in the Hebrew Israelite community, we understand that different people who were not the Hebrews of old worked on the text, fixed it up, translated it, put vowel pointings, did all kinds of things to the text that they felt were necessary. And voila, we've got the modern Bible. The text they received and the edits they provided ensured the modern Jewish texts would manifest a notable departure from the original Hebrew scriptures. If you want that in English, it is saying that based on the changes that were made, the text ended up becoming different than the original Hebrew scriptures, and the changes that they made ensured that this would happen. So this was not just sloppy editing, just people who didn't know the Hebrew or so. Apparently, this person is saying that they ensured it would become different from the original scriptures. So one can understand that it's little wonder there's so much arguing about the scriptures. It don't matter who you talk to, which group you talk to, even someone you really like in the group or the religion that you are in. As long as they're using the Bible, there's going to be somebody else who does not like them, the way they teach it. So we've got one book that's supposed to unify us, but we're not agreeing. But we say we serve one Elohim, but we're fighting over his book. You say it is his book. I say it is his book that he gave to us. People say it's his book and he gave it to us, allowed it to be preserved. How much of that is really true? How much? I have been doing more and more reading over time. I'm looking into the language because I'm still not satisfied that Hebrew is the language that our forefathers, our earliest forefathers, were speaking. Even if you tell me it's paleo-Hebrew, what really is that? Because paleo-Hebrew just basically then means very early Hebrew. So then it would mean that it does not look the same way, and one would go further to say that it doesn't even sound the same way. Because, you can't do all this searching and reading and not think that there is something wrong. I'm not telling you to throw out your Bible. I'm still reading mine and it's helping me. It's benefiting me. I'm learning more and so on. But I'm just saying that as I read it, I can see some things that just don't add up. And we had this talk in the Christian church when I was growing up, the unadulterated Word of God. Many of you who are in the Christian church probably haven't heard that talk in a long time because it's not used much more. We seem to be so exact about everything. The problem I've seen now in the Israelite community is that everyone who teaches wants to be right. Usually, I should say. And that's fine. But the problem is that everyone keeps saying they are right about everything. If you look back in my lessons, I don't carry myself like that. Because, one, I'm new with this Hebrew Israelite understanding, and two, I haven't seen anyone yet who is right about everything. Not a single person. Not a single person. Now, the longer you go with it and the more learned you become, the more experience you have reading the Hebrew text, and the more knowledge you have of the world, the more you learn and the more you become correct, the more you get it right. But no one has always been right. And the problem with someone who is so well advanced in teaching Torah is that they always seem right because they are an expert by now. Yet, if they're living in my time and your time, I have to agree that they are also reading a text that has been through the washing machine and the dryer. So that I'm not satisfied in thinking that they are reading from an untainted text. If you're reading from a text that is not 100% accurate anymore, based on all my reading that I've done and I continue to read, it is going to be difficult for you to be right all the time. And so you may be right about certain topics, but there might come a topic or two where you're just not hitting it, but you seem right. So it behoves all of us to really be humble some of the times. Now, there are cases when you're teaching something, you're sharing something, and you're just right. It just makes sense. Every way it gets looked at, it's just, So I'm not talking about those times because that's good. That's going to happen to all of us. But while we are right on some things, there's going to be some things that we teach that are just not correct. That's why sometimes you'll see me put out a video and I say, these are my thoughts on this. As I'm thinking something through and I'm wondering about it and it seems like it might be this or that. Because I can't always be correct. Now hear what they're saying about the text. that we read from, we call the Bible, historical research reveals 5 significant ways in which the Masoretic text is different from the original Old Testament. 1. The Masoreths admitted that they received corrupted text to begin with. The Masoretic text is written with a radically different alphabet than the original. Radically different alphabet. So how is it that we are so sure of all the things that we teach and the alphabet is radically different from what was there before? You and I don't speak paleo-hebrew, and even for the ones of us who has looked into it and studied it a lot, I don't hear you walking around speaking it and teaching it anyway. And how are you going to be so sure when you weren't there, when paleo-Hebrew was being written and spoken? How? So what I'm trying to say is that maybe we need a little bit more tolerance for each other. It doesn't mean you're not going to teach hard the things you believe in. Everyone who's teaching needs to teach it hard, because you have to, if you're not really that convinced, why bother teach it? But even with that, instead of the rest of us cursing you out, saying you're a deceiver and so on, unless you know the person is a deceiver, or the person has carried themselves in a way where they've operated, in ways that people know that something is shady about them, then unless that's the case, maybe more tolerance is needed, because really most of us are just really trying to find the Most High. None of us want to be lost or cut off in the end. When I say none of us, I'm saying none of us who are doing the seeking and searching. We know that there are some among us who have really sold out. Those ones, they don't really care, so they're really done for already. They're just waiting for their time to expire while they continue their evil. Because in their heart, they know they're lost already. They're deceiving their own people intentionally and so on. But maybe, some more tolerance, because it's hard to see the alphabet of the original text from Moses' days and before Moses is really not available to us, but we're so sure of this and that all the time. Sure sometimes, but sure all the time, no. Then he goes on to say the Masoreths added vowel points which did not exist in the original. And it's funny because they're like, all they did was just add the vowel pointings. I mean, why add vowel pointings? What, you're trying to give vowels to the consonants or to the letters? When I look at the Hebrew letters, they look to me like they just have vowels. And some will say, well, some of the consonants were actually used as vowels. They look to me like they all have vowels in them. Every single letter of the Hebrew. You cannot even say the letters without pronouncing vowels. First of all, they tell you Aleph, which is a very mysterious letter to start out the language with. They say it's silent, yet you're pronouncing it most of the times. Now you might put a kataf or patach under it to tell you how to pronounce it. Why? If it's silent, it's not supposed to be pronounced. They're putting that under it because they're trying to get you to pronounce it. Why are you trying to get me to pronounce an unpronounceable letter? A silent letter. So is the Aleph really silent? But you realize as well that the moment you say Aleph, you're dealing with a vowel. A, E, Ale, Aleph, Bet. Just to call the letters, you're actually using vowels. So the consonants themselves have vowels built into them. Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, you don't hear vowels in that. Even if you just want to write it out, Dalet, you don't hear vowels there. So then, why was it necessary for the Masoreths to add vowel pointings to the text? They will tell you, as they told me, that, it's just to help people pronounce it and figure out the right pronunciation. I'm now understanding that this is complete and utter garbage of a reason. Complete 101%, I should say. You see, when I started this Hebrew language search, I felt very silly. I felt dumb. I was thinking, I'm just going to show up how much of an idiot I am, talking about what is the real Hebrew language, what is the real language of the patriarchs and so on. I felt dumb. And people are going to just laugh at me. Oh, this brother, yeah, he's trying, all right, he's trying. He's young, he's new, he just left the Christian church. He doesn't know any knowledge of all this stuff. But at least he's willing to look into it. That's good, that's promising. But I felt like an idiot still. But the thing is that while I felt so dumb, I have learned so much by looking into this topic. And I realized that the vowel pointings being added was just complete garbage. The letters themselves are a representation of both consonants and vowels. So you in your English mind need to think that we need to add a vowel to it when the language itself is inclusive of consonants and vowels. It's you who don't know the language. So for them to put in vowel pointings, they were accomplishing something else. The next point here they give, the Masoretic text excluded several books from the Old Testament scriptures. The Masoretic text includes changes to prophecy and doctrine. But look at this first one again that I mentioned, the ways in which it was significantly different from the Old Testament text, original text. The Masoretes admitted that they received corrupted text to begin with. And I'd come across that a couple of years ago as well. But you understand that if they received corrupted texts, how is it that we are told that the Masoretes between the 7th and 11th centuries, and sometimes you see this date pop up a lot, 1000 or 1008 AD pops up a lot, which would mean probably, okay, let's say Babylonian exile was, you get different kinds of dates because the counting is kind of up and down with different people. But somewhere around 598, 597 to 608 BC, they went into Babylonian captivity and came out somewhere around 538 or so BC. So let's say about 600, let me just pick a number, about 600 BC they went into Babylonian captivity. And then in about 1000 AD, the Masoretes are changing up the language and fixing vowel pointings and so on and trying to do something with the alphabet, which according to what people are finding out here is a radically different alphabet than the original. Then if they're adding vowel pointings, they are adding vowel pointings to an alphabet that is radically different from the original language, which means they're adding vowel pointings to a language that was not even, to an alphabet that was not even the alphabet that was used to write the text in the first place. Yet we are expected to use the same text to find all of the truth. No wonder we're only finding some of the truth. So if they're doing these changes round about 1000 AD or 1008 AD, that's round about 1600 years after the Babylonian captivity. 1600 years or so after is when the Masoretes are making these changes. First of all, nothing that I've read gives me any sure knowledge that these Masoretes were Hebrew Israelites. So they are changing, it just simply says they are scribes and Torah scholars, they are changing a text of the Israelites 1600 years later after the Babylonian captivity started. And they say that they are changing it to fix it. Fix it as if it was broken. But here in this 5-point list of the significant ways in which the Masoretic text is different from the original, the first point says the Masoretes admitted that they received corrupted text to begin with, but they said they are fixing it. How can you fix a corrupted text by using a radically different alphabet and then adding vowel pointings, adding vowels to that different alphabet in a text that's corrupt, then they didn't fix anything that has to do with the original text. Because if you got corrupted text and you haven't shown the world that it is no longer corrupt, you might have added vowel pointings, but the text is still corrupt with a radically different alphabet as well. Now look at this. They said the Masoretes were fixing the text, fixing corrections from the Babylonian corruption of the text when they were in Babylonian exile. My thing that I ask myself is, you're 1600 years later. You weren't in the captivity with them to know all the changes or all the corruptions that happened. So how can you fix the text to become right again when you do not know what was the right text? Either something else is going on, or you, the Masoretes, or the powers that be, have available to them the real original text, or copies of the real text, and have kept it away from the rest of the world, and so they know this that we have available to the public is corrupt because we got the real one and this ain't it, but we'll publish it to you and keep the real one. If they've got corrupted text, and if everyone is saying something is wrong with the text, when you look at real scholars, how do you know the text is corrupt if you don't have an original correct text to match it up with and to verify that these two are different from each other? How do you know? So if someone is telling you they're making corrections to the text because something was done wrong to it 1600 years earlier in Babylon, that means they got the original ones, or at least the ones from Babylon 1600 years ago, available to them. But the one that's available to the public in 1000 AD, that's the one they're going to give to the public. Look from Wikipedia on the Masoretes. The Masoretes, there were groups of Jewish scribe scholars who worked between the 6th and 10th centuries. Notice every time you read things like this, it's always Jewish scholars or Jewish rabbis. And I mean, I didn't hear people with Moses and so on and Jeremiah calling people rabbis. And what's the other words now more popular in the New Testament? Pharisees and so on, and Sadducees. Where did all those terms come from? It's obvious they came from the time when the Hebrews were taken down, right before the New Testament came in with the Roman Empire, Greek and Romans. But it says the Masoretes were groups of these scribes, these scribe scholars, and they were attempting to, they were setting up a system of grammatical guides and standardizing the pronunciation of the text and so on. So they put in these vowel pointings and so on to help you to say it properly. But my question is, if they knew where to put the vowel pointings, it's because they knew how to make the pronunciations correctly. The more I look into the Hebrew and the Hebrew Bible itself, with the words that the Creator was saying, it seems to me that these words should not be changed in any way, period. They should not be translated. They should not be changed. In fact, it is just better if you don't even put them over into another language. If you want the words of the Creator, you should go and learn how He speaks. That's what's coming home to me more and more. So if He was speaking in some ancient Hebrew, instead of making a new Hebrew and then adding on vowel pointings and this, that, and the other, why not just simply, if you are so interested in spreading this religion all over the earth, why not teach the people the language so that they know how to read the text, instead of changing the language and giving them an updated text? Because by the time the language is changed, you're going to have to print a new kind of text, a new copy, that reflect the changes you are putting in so that people can read according to the new changes you're making. So it would be better to have just taught the people the language who need to learn to read the Bible. Or at least teach them in their own language and tell them this is the closest we can come, because these words in the original scrolls cannot or should not be duplicated in other languages. But since we speak that original language and we understand what the Creator is saying, we can tell it to you in your language because we also speak your language. And if you are interested in learning more of what the Creator said about how to live on the earth, then let this other language whet your appetite with the information that we're sharing to you about it, and then you can go and learn the original language. Because how can a language just die that the Creator is speaking in? The Creator is speaking to people in a particular language, and He Himself is eternal. He's got no beginning and no end. But His language comes to an end, and you're telling me that language is gone from the earth? But He did say, Zechariah 3:9, I'm going to restore language. So obviously. So if He's going to restore, that means no one should have done any changes. So if no one should have made changes, who or which God was the Masoretic working for? Oh, man. But look at what, this is Wikipedia. I'm not making fun of this. I'm going to read their name for you. Masoreths. From the Hebrew, it says, Baalei HaMazorah. Now it's interesting when I look at that, Baalei HaMazorah, it's coming home to me here that Baalei starts up with Baal. Now, why is anyone connected to Baal translating your text and telling you how to pronounce words? This clearly says Baal. And Baal was a deity, but also a pantheon that was taking over the entire ancient world at one point. So you're starting to see what I'm getting at here, people, is that Baal has given you the Bible you have today in the modern form that you have it. I don't know. It's really tough. Let's run off Wikipedia. Let's go over to this other website. JewishEncyclopedia.com, Masorah by Crawford Howell Toy, Casper Levias, and Masorah is the system of critical notes on the external form of the biblical text. This system of notes represents the literary labors of innumerable scholars, of which the beginning falls probably in pre-macabbean times and the end reaches to the year 1425. These people who were changing the text to give you the modern Bible you have were not even the children of Israel. They were not Israelites. Because if this stuff is going on from probably before Maccabean times, that's like in the Maccabean times, you're dealing with the intertestamental period. That period, a couple hundred years, probably 400 or so years between the Old and the New Testament. And the end reaches to 1425. We know coming up to 1425, Hebrew Israelites were not editing the Bible to publish it to the world the way we have it today. So Israelites weren't doing this. So it seems once they got into Babylon, some people who were not Israelites were doing something to the text. And you've got your modern Bible today. The page goes on saying now on this subtopic, etymology of the name. And I should read this scripture because they're going to give a scripture for you. The name Masoreth, which tells you, the name Masoreth occurs in many forms. The etymology, pronunciation, and genetic connection of which are much mooted points. So it's like people can't even properly agree. But they said the term is taken from Ezekiel 20 verse 37 and means originally fetter. The fixation of the text was correctly considered to be in the nature of a fetter upon its exposition. Fetter, so you're bound to it. When in course of time the Masoreth had become a traditional discipline, the term became connected with another verb meaning to hand down and was given the meaning of tradition. So it changed from being a fetter to just simply being a tradition being passed down. Look up the etymology of the word fetter. It says fetter as a noun, Old English, fetor, chain or shackle, by which a person or animal is bound by the feet, figuratively, check, restraint. So basically, the generalized sense of anything that shackles. So it's like you're bound. Now let's read the verse in Ezekiel 20 verse 37. And I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. And that's the word there, bond, from H4562, that says masoreth. And it means a bond, and then of the covenant is in brackets. And it's from another word, asar, which means to bind or imprison. So basically, there's an obligation of an oath. So I will bring you into obligation of the covenant. So you'll be obligated. So basically, if you're going to be like imprisoned, it's kind of a way that says you are shackled, you are bound to this. You can't get out of this. I'm going to bring you to this point. You cannot live apart from this. You are connected to this for life. That's what Masoreth originally meant. But as the Masoretic system or thinking continued over time, or the Masoretic discipline, it got changed to meaning a tradition that passed down, as opposed to being shackled to a covenant. So it no longer means that you are bound to a covenant that identifies you as the only people on earth that the Creator was dealing with in this particular way, but it now means it's just a tradition that is passed down. So you see the watering down of the scriptures over time. The understanding has changed. And you got a Bible today. No wonder the Most High speaks so much of restoring things, because he knows that stuff has changed so much. It's like I started out saying from that one guy saying if Moses were to read the Bible today, he couldn't read it. If he would try, he couldn't read it, because this is in Hebrew. And for my first video with the Hebrew language search, I was telling you how they're saying this modern Hebrew started around 1000 BC. That's very, very late in history. Considering that we got all kinds of patriarchs before that were speaking. What were they speaking then? I'm left to think that they were speaking Aramaic or something else. And now Aramaic itself is turning out to be a threatened language on the earth. Are they trying to make it extinct? So now, if I read from, okay, let me read from this one more website, gotquestions.org. What is the Masoretic text? Look at what it says here. The Hebrew text of the Old Testament is called the Masoretic text because in its present form it is based upon the Masorah, the Hebrew textual tradition of the Jewish scholars known as the Masoreths or Masoretes. The Masoretes were rabbis who made it their special work to correct the faults that had crept into the text of the Old Testament during the Babylonian captivity and to prevent for the future its being corrupted by any alteration. So they were trying to correct the faults that had crept into the text during the Babylonian captivity. So at the time when the people of Judah went into the Babylonian captivity, they were the ones really concerned with their text, the purity of their text, because it's their book, their writings. They were the ones concerned with it, and now we find about 1600 years later, somebody says we need to fix it. Why weren't the Hebrews trying to fix it right after they left Babylon? But the people who are using what seems to me to be a different language that is called Hebrew, because my studies are showing me that this Hebrew today is not the Hebrew of the Old Testament. If Moses couldn't read it, it is not the same. This is a completely different semi-modern language. Because you still have to give Hebrew its place. It's been there from before Christ and so on. So it's like a new language gets made on the earth called Hebrew. And it will fix the text. Now, it makes you really wonder, doesn't it? If Hebrew was not the language, then were the Israelites Hebrews? Or were they called something else? Because Hebrew is the name of the language, and that wasn't the language they spoke, then were they themselves the name of the language they did not speak? Hebrew. So were they Hebrews? Because I've come upon some different names that the Hebrews were called over time in different empires and so on. Were they Hebrews? Could it be our real name is hidden